All right, let's jump right into a question that might just break your brain a little. We all know countries have debt. The United States, China, Germany, Japan, pretty much everyone. But think about that for a second. If every single country owes money, who exactly is everyone borrowing from? Right? Who is the world's creditor? It sounds like a simple riddle, but the answer pulls back the curtain on the entire invisible architecture of our modern financial world. And trust me, it's not what you think. Because we are not talking about chump change here. Total global debt has ballooned to over $315 trillion. To put that into perspective, that's nearly 3 times bigger than the entire global economy. It's a number so huge it's almost meaningless, and it leads us straight into a massive paradox. And getting our heads around this paradox is the key to understanding, well, everything. This isn't just some accounting problem. It's about the very foundation our world is built on. This quote here really nails it. You see, we're all taught to see debt as a bad thing, a personal failure. But when you're talking about nations, it's the complete opposite. It's the system itself. And to figure out how we got here, we've got to rewind a bit. National debt was literally born from war. Back in 1694, England needed cash, and fast, to fight France. So they came up with a brilliant, revolutionary idea: the government bond. It was basically a promise, an IOU, backed by future taxes that you could buy and sell. And this idea, it worked so well that it spread like wildfire. Soon, having debt wasn't a sign of weakness. It became a sign of strength and credibility. So, fast forward 300 plus years. Who's actually holding all these IOUs today? To figure that out, let's zoom in on the biggest debtor of them all, the United States, with its mind-boggling $38 trillion debt. Okay, and here's the first big twist in the story. You might assume other countries own most of America's debt, but look at this. A full 2/3 of the publicly held debt is owned by Americans. We're talking about our own banks, our own pension funds, insurance companies, the very money that fuels our retirement. It's invested in these bonds. So, for the most part, America owes money to itself. Well, what about that other third, the part held by foreign countries? Japan is actually the biggest holder. And China, the country everyone thinks owns the US, they hold about 800 billion. Now, that sounds like a lot, but it's only about 2% of the total US debt. So that whole narrative, it's a huge exaggeration. The best way to think about it is like a circular mirror. The government, the US Treasury, issues bonds. American institutions, like the one managing your retirement fund, buy those bonds. Then, American taxpayers, that's us, fund the interest payments that flow right back into those very same retirement and savings accounts. It's one big, self-contained loop. And this isn't just an American thing. This same basic model scales up across the entire planet. It's like a giant global game of hot potato, where the potato is made of promises. Japan lends to the US lends to Europe lends to developing countries who then buy bonds from the West. It's this massive, tangled web of IOUs. Okay, but this is where we get to the absolute craziest, most counterintuitive part of this whole system. The secret ingredient that keeps this game of hot potato going is that this debt, it's never, ever supposed to be paid back. Think about it like this. When you take out a car loan or a mortgage, your goal is to pay it all back, to get that balance down to zero. But for governments, that's not the goal at all. They just roll over the debt. When a bond is due, they just issue a new one to pay for the old one. It's a process called refinancing, but a better way to think of it is like a subscription service, kind of like Netflix. The government isn't trying to get you to pay off your subscription. They just want you to keep paying the monthly fee, the interest, forever. The actual principal, that just gets renewed over and over again. So you're probably asking yourself, why on earth would anyone buy a loan that they know will never be repaid? Well, funny enough, that's exactly what makes it so valuable. A US Treasury bond is considered the safest financial asset on the planet. It's the bedrock, the ultimate collateral that the entire global market is built on. It's like a shark, It has to keep swimming to breathe. The system doesn't run on repayment. It runs on the confidence that the subscription will always get renewed. The goal isn't to actually pay off the debt. The goal is to keep everyone believing that it could be. But what happens when that belief, that confidence, suddenly shatters? Well, the consequences aren't just numbers on a screen. They are very real, and they are absolutely devastating. Just look at Greece back in 2010. Confidence evaporated, and the so-called bailout came at a brutal price, crippling austerity. We're talking massive tax hikes, deep cuts to healthcare, and skyrocketing unemployment. For an entire generation, the rescue just felt like punishment. Or you have Argentina, where defaulting on debt has become this tragic, recurring nightmare, wiping out the life savings of ordinary people over and over again. And just recently in Sri Lanka, when they ran out of money to make their interest payments, the entire society just stopped. People waiting in line for days for fuel, political chaos. It shows you just how fragile this whole thing is. When the confidence breaks, the system grinds to a halt. So all of this brings us full circle, right back to our original question. If it's not another country, if it's not some shadowy cabal of bankers, then who or what is the real global creditor? The ultimate creditor isn't a person or a place. It's an idea. It's confidence. This entire $315 trillion house of cards is held up by the collective belief that the music will never stop, that the subscription will always be renewed. It's a belief managed by central banks and markets, but at the end of the day, it comes from us. And this system, this machine running on pure belief, has a very direct and very profound side effect. It acts as a massive engine for wealth transfer. The interest payments are funded by everyday taxpayers and workers. But where does that money go? It flows upward to the institutions and the wealthy investors who own most of the bonds. It's a system that, by its very design, concentrates wealth at the top. So let's just quickly recap the big takeaways. First, most countries owe money to their own people and their own institutions. Second, this debt is never ever meant to be paid off, just refinanced forever. That's because these bonds are the world's safest asset. The whole system runs on nothing more than pure confidence. And finally, when that confidence breaks, the human cost can be absolutely immense. Which leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling question to chew on. Our entire global economy is built on this circular promise, a promise that has to get bigger and bigger forever to survive. But is that a promise that can actually be kept forever?